Welcome. We are in AP English, and our objective now is to introduce our study of Shakespeare. I'll be speaking on multiple levels as we begin this conversation. And I'll try at the conclusion of the lecture to frame our more serious study of a single Shakespeare play, Hamlet. Let's begin in 1600 Common Era. That's the year that we believe that the great play Hamlet will be produced on stage for the first time. We're a little bit iffy about this whole thing, as your lecturer, Sacho, already said to you. There's some huge debate about some of the more serious details about the life of Shakespeare, the creation of his work. But let's just imagine that you were able to get in some kind of a time machine and go back to 1600, and if you could find this chap named Shakespeare living either at Stratford-on-Avon, a small town outside of London, or most of his life in London itself in the theater district, and you were to walk up to him and say what is an absolute fact now in 2012, soon to be 2013, and you were to find him and say what is, I say, an absolute fact, and that is, by 2012, 2013, you will be considered the greatest writer in the history of any language. And as I say, that is not a debate anymore. I mean, nobody really stands around debating that observation. Pretty much he's accorded that place as the single greatest writer in any language. And you were to say this to him, he would laugh at you. He would say about that observation, you must be seriously stoned or something, because there is absolutely no way that's true. Shakespeare did not believe he would be famous. There was absolutely no reason to believe that during his lifetime. Several times his playhouse was shut down. They would sometimes come up with reasons for this, that were related to sanitation and the like. But a lot of times it was just quite simple. He was the source of all kinds of levels of obscenity and pornography, and the religious intelligentsia of the day didn't want his ideas on stage. He wasn't alone in this regards. Let's talk about London itself, a town that at some point you definitely want to put on your to-visit list. The town itself is divided by the river Thames, is the way we pronounce it. It's actually, it looks like it should be pronounced Thames, T-H-A-M-E-S, but we pronounce it the River Thames. And it cuts London in half. When I begin to lecture Shakespeare, one of the things that I like to point out right away is who Shakespeare was within his context. We will call him an Elizabethan, but that's because he lived during most of his life during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And to that degree, then, we call these times Elizabethan times. If we're talking about the time of Queen Elizabeth, one of the important dates for us is actually not 1600, it's 1588. 1588 is the defeat of the Great Spanish Armada. Armada is just another word for an entourage of ships or a navy. Spain had a tremendous navy, unbelievable number of ships and sailor marines who could fight using those ships. Through tremendous courage and a bit of fortuitous luck, in 1588, England defeats Spain and the Spanish Armada. And in so doing, ostensibly, England then becomes the greatest power of the world. Elizabeth is sitting on the throne. The ripple effect through England is prodigious. One of the great things that Elizabeth did, for example, is she demanded that everyone have up to an 8th grade education. Now that becomes really important. She was a very, very shrewd woman. She understood, for example, if every single person in England can read up to 8th grade, then I'm able to control to some degree dissemination of information through things that will later be called newspapers and the like. Makes sense, right? You can control people to some degree if you can somehow have them all read. Okay? But entertainment becomes central as well. Queen Elizabeth loved the theater. Without her patronage, we probably would not have the great development of theater that we today understand as Elizabethan drama, and especially Shakespeare. It's Elizabeth who in large measure will say to the actors of the day, you are of value. Okay? And in so doing, Shakespeare has an opportunity then to become quote-unquote famous. But as I say, during his day, Shakespeare didn't write for fame. One of the ways we know this is that he did not try to market and sell the actual folios of his stuff. He didn't sell it for print. In other words, Shakespeare wasn't writing to be read. He was writing to be watched. And he understood that. Well, if Shakespeare wasn't writing for fame, then what was he writing for? Bank. That plain and simple. Bank, money. He wanted to make currency, and apparently he did okay. From the little bits that we know about this cat, he was able to at least have 2 houses. One in that little town we call Stratford-on-Avon. You can visit it even today. And of course he had some kind of place to live in London itself. So he must have done okay for himself. How did he make bank? Well, it's here now that we must step right into the world of Shakespeare. And I believe it's the only way to really read today and study Shakespeare. And that is to ask the simple question, who was Shakespeare's audience? Because Shakespeare understood something that today we take kind of like for granted. Now, I continue to do this in this lecture, and at some point, it will be evidence that I've gotten too old and this word picture will no longer work. Maybe it's this year. Every year I preface my experiment by saying that, and then I ask a simple question. A show of hands. How many of you have seen, either in full or in part, a Jackie Chan movie? Raise your hand. Go ahead, don't be embarrassed. The camera's only pointing towards me. Thank you. Now, do you think that this is some strange enclave in the history or in the country of America where all kinds of young people were raised watching Jackie Chan films? That I would ask, and fully at least 98%, if not 100% of you were able to raise your hand, that you had at least seen a Jackie Chan film. Or do you think that if I were to go to Cherry Creek in Denver and walk into a classroom there and to ask, how many of you have seen a Jackie Chan film, do you have a sense that everybody would raise their hand there? Or if I were to go, for example, to Okisho in Japan, one of the top high schools in Japan, in Okinawa, southern Okinawa, and I were to ask, how many of you have seen a Jackie Chan? Right? Do you got this sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? But I'm not done with my observation. How many of you have seen the same Jackie Chan film more than one time? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Don't embarrass. You don't have to feel embarrassed. We're just making an observation. Wow. Well, now, wait a minute. Is that because the plot structure was so unbelievably complicated that you had to go back to study a second time to make sure? I just don't know if I remember everything that happened in the film. I need to go back and reanalyze the way, for example, maybe we restudy a novel like The Brothers Karamazov because it's so complex. No. See, Jackie Chan understands something that Shakespeare taught him, and that is the real money is made in resale when you get them to come back and watch the text again and again and again. The idea here is pretty simple. If you can entertain them once with a text, you can entertain them twice and even more times. And each time they're entertained, guess what? They're paying money. Shakespeare invents this concept by and large. And from Shakespeare on, it kind of becomes standard protocol that if you want to make bank in entertainment, you kind of need to know your audience and then give your audience what your audience wants. Well, now wait a minute. Who is Shakespeare's audience? This is foundational to understanding Shakespeare and his performances. Well, to tell that, I've got to tell a story that one or two of you have already heard. The River Thames cuts London in half. On one side of the river, you have the respectable part of London, and on the other side of the river, you have, I'll call it the entertainment district. Can I just call it that? Okay, you get on a boat, you go across the Thames River, and there's any number of activities over there that I shan't go into in detail, other than to say, there is this interesting little arena that reminds you of the old Dallas Cowboys football stadium. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Dallas Cowboys, and more particularly the stadium that they used to play in. The stadium was constructed in such a way that there was no roof. It was circular, but there was no roof. That, in the old days, we used to say that was so God could watch his team play on Sundays. Nobody says that anymore in Dallas, sorry. And this arena was a strange one. People came to fill the arena. When you walked inside, there was a large circular straw or sawdust or dirt floor. Out of the center was a post. Everyone would arrive, fill up. There would be a nervous buzz in the arena. And then a bear was brought out into the arena. He had a muzzle on. This bear had been tortured the way you can take any animal and begin to starve it and not let it sleep and jab it with sticks and the like, and you can turn it into a ferocious creature. This bear had been brutalized for what was about to be witnessed. The bear would be chained to the post. The muzzle would be torn off of its snout, and it would immediately begin to snap at anything around it. And then from around the outside of the arena, along the bottom, little gates would be raised, and dogs would run out. People had paid money to watch these dogs try to kill this bear. This was the highest form of entertainment in 1600 in London. These dogs had been trained to kill this bear. They would attack the bear, obviously many of the dogs dying. They would attack the bear in unison so that one of the dogs could jump onto the back of the bear, bite huge chunks of flesh out and begin to rip it, blood being splattered all over the people who are sitting down close. By the way, where do you think the most expensive seats are? Down close to the arena or up high in away from where all the blood gets splattered? Well, before you answer, think about this. And for those of you who go, oh, good heavens, those barbarians. Yeah, think about this. If you go to Denver to watch a World Federation wrestling event, where are the most expensive seats? Are they right next to the arena, or are they way up high in the rafter section? Where are the most expensive seats when you go to a World Federation event? You don't have to have gone to a World Federation event to know. The most expensive seats, just like in Elizabethan England, right down there where you can get the blood splattered all over the face. It could take up to 2 hours to kill one of these bears. Just cruel kind of thing. They loved it. They loved it. Of course, dogfighting was also a huge form of entertainment, but the bear baiting was even funner because you had to, you had to get a lot of dogs killed and wounded to be able to watch that bear finally get his. When the final moment would happen, that the dogs would tear the bear's throat out and it'd be the end of it. But I'm not done. These same people, and this is crucial to understanding Shakespeare. In my estimation, this is the key to understanding Shakespeare. These same people, with the blood splattered all over their face, would walk out of the bear baiting arena, walk 200 yards down the road to another arena that looked just like the bear baiting arena. It was a circular structure without a roof on it. They would see on the placard there that the performance of Romeo and Juliet was about to happen. The same people with the bear blood on their face would walk in and watch a 2-hour performance of Romeo and Juliet. The same people. Now, why do I make this distinction? Well, let's ask it this way. If none of us knew Mr. Wilson and I were to say out loud to him, Mr. Wilson, what are your plans for this weekend? And he were to say, oh, I'm very excited. This weekend I'm driving down to Denver with a colleague or two, and we are going down there to watch a performance of Shakespeare's Tempest. It's going to be very entertaining. And we didn't know Wilson at all. We would have a certain view in our mind of Wilson and the kind of experience that he was about to have, where he was going to go watch a performance of Shakespeare, probably dressed in some kind of bow tie, where during intermissions people would sup from, large, nice little glass and drink champagne or wine. On the other hand, if we didn't know Wilson, and we were to ask him, what are you doing this weekend? And he said, oh man, it's so cool. Me and some of my buddies are going down to Denver. There's this World Federation event. They're going to lock 20 guys inside of a cage, and the last guy standing is the winner of $10 million. It's going to be awesome, and I've got ringside tickets. If we didn't know Wilson at all, we would have a different view of him. Oh, World Federation Wrestling, a certain kind of clientele goes to World Federation Wrestling. It ain't the same kind of people that go to Shakespeare with bow ties and champagne. Are you hearing me? Shakespeare's audience had no distinctions like this. Shakespeare becomes high culture later, not in his lifetime. This is the reason they shut down his stage. Shakespeare wrote to an audience that liked bear baiting. They would come in and watch Romeo and Juliet with blood on their face. Which will explain something really important about Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare wrote for two audiences. He had to entertain both audiences, or he wasn't going to make the money or the bank that he needed. Those two audiences are foundational to studying his work, because he did not write his plays for you. Like I said, if you were to go back to 1600 and say, yeah, no, we're studying your play Hamlet, he would be like, really? You got to be kidding me. Okay. Today, by the way, Hamlet considered the single greatest production of Shakespeare. When we talk about Hamlet, we talk about his greatest play. According to most scholars, this is still the subject of some debate, but it's hard to debate against this idea that Hamlet is Shakespeare's greatest work. I'll obviously be making some of those arguments as we go. All right, the audiences of Shakespeare for your notes. When you look at the theater itself, the way it's built, the way it's constructed, the Globe Theater, replica now standing in London across the Thames. If you wish to go and visit, you can watch performances even. Was constructed to accommodate both groups. First of all, we have that group that we will call the groundlings. The pit audience, the groundlings. Now, if you hear that someone has gotten tickets to a concert today to stand right in front of the stage, okay? Now, I'm not saying this from personal experience, but I've been told that when you go and stand in front of the stage at certain rock concerts, there's all kinds of craziness that goes on. I've read about it, you see. And this gets kind of, lots of jostling and people touching you and things happening, and I don't know. I read that it happens that way. That's the pit audience, the groundlings. We call them the groundlings today because they didn't sit down. They were too poor to afford a seat. So they literally just stood and watched the performance, okay? They stood in the center of the arena and there was no roof. And since these plays were not performed at night but during the day, and because there's lots of rain in London, a lot of times they just stood there and got rained on, okay? And so this is the groundling audience, the pit audience. They come for two reasons. One, their primary interest in coming is blood and guts. They want to see violence. Hello, they're the ones that have the blood on their face from the bear baiting experience just a few moments before. They want to see violence, and they want to see all kinds of extravaganza and spectacle. Think about the way Macbeth opens. You saw the performance just a few days ago. Some of you, for the very first time, had ever seen that play. Who comes onto the stage the very first? It ain't Macbeth. The very first people that come onto the stage are these strangely dressed people with the faces. We will call them witches, right? And they come onto the stage for the very first time acting very strange. When shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, there to meet Macbeth. And for the first time you hear Macbeth's name, but you're looking at these really freaky... I love to go to Shakespeare, as you will, to watch the audience. Remember your Aristotle's Poetics. The real drama is in the seats. It ain't on the stage. Shakespeare, by the way, understood this concept well. To watch, for example, Whirlwind High School students when those witches came out. Some students were wanting to try to act cool and all, like, this is really stupid. What is this about? Others couldn't help but be a bit kind of drawn to, what is this about? And Shakespeare immediately has his groundlings at that point. Well, wait a minute. That great play of love that we wasted on you when you were freshmen, and I believe we do waste it with freshmen. You're too young and stupid to be able to enjoy the beauty of that play. We call it a play of love. But wait a minute. At the beginning of the play, we have a monumental fight. Remember? That play has a scene that just a few minutes later will lead the young Romeo on stage to point to a pool of blood and say, "What's the cause of this?" Large pool of blood. Well, we know, we've watched it. There's just been a huge gang fight that just happened with all kinds of sword fighting and the like going on. Shakespeare was the first Steve Spielberg. He took a goat's stomach, he filled it with blood, and he put it up underneath the shirt of one of his actors who was going to get stabbed. They would do their sword fighting with live swords, with real pointies on the, and when it stuck in, blood would pop out. Yes, blood goes everywhere. Oh, these groundlings, they love this kind of thing. Wait a minute, the play Hamlet opens with a ghost. You got to remember, these are not real sophisticated people. They really believe in ghosts. They believe that ghosts walk around and inhabit the earth. So when you see a ghost, it's going to freak them out, just like the witches at the beginning of Macbeth, which, by the way, they believe in witches, right? They believe in witches. So they're not only freaked out, they are freaked out, but they love it, okay? That's the first reason that they come. They love the blood and guts. And are you ready for this? In every single Shakespeare play, we will have some element of that. In every one. In every one. Doesn't matter. Some of you are beginning to process real quickly. Oh yeah, JC. Right. They jacked JC right in the middle with all those people stabbing him over and over you. Right. So you're getting it. That's the first reason. The second? Well, I hate to say this, but the second's not any better than the first. The second is the dirty sex jokes and the four-letter explicatives. In every Shakespeare play, you got this. Wait a minute, we were just referencing Romeo and Juliet, weren't we? And we were talking about that great play of love. And we were talking about the fact that the play begins with a fight. That we remember. But do we remember why they're fighting? Oh yeah, they are two families that hate each other's guts. No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, why do the two families who hate each other's guts, the Capulets and the Montagues, why do they fight in the first place at the beginning of this great play of love? Right. Imagine it for a moment. There's all kinds of buzz in Worland about the new performance that Mr. Dorn will have. There is so much interest. We're going to do this over at the middle school theater. Everyone's there. The room is packed. All of Worland's finest, including the mayor, etc., etc., all there. When out onto the stage walks the lead actor, and he begins to give what we today affectionately call the hand sign of the bird. That is to say, he begins to flip off the audience. The four-letter F word is there. And he begins to just scream it out loud and flip off the audience, saying the F word over and over again. Miss Cottrell's face was like this. Are you kidding? But see that laugh right there of Mr. Schreiber? Yeah, that laugh. Right? Okay. That, remember, is the way the play of love begins. So violent is the language of the first 100 lines of Romeo and Juliet. It isn't in the Leonardo DiCaprio version. It isn't in any version of film you will ever see. You're not going to usually even see it on stage. Why not? Because you have two guys talking about how they're going to find the girls of the other side. It's not a play of love. It is a play of politics. And Shakespeare wants to point it out right away. But his groundlings could care less about that. They love the... Well, let me give you an example. Imagine it. Again, we're back to our middle school stage. Halfway through the play, it's a play about a guy and his girl. Oh, and she is so beautiful. Oh, and he comes onto the stage one side, she comes onto the other side, and he looks at her across the stage and he goes, "Yo, slut, how's it going?" Now look at that face Schreiber has right there. Wait a minute. We're going to see this in this play Hamlet. And at a pivotal moment, here's the odd thing. You can go up on the streets of any American town and walk up to people at random and go, "To be or not to be?" And they'll go, "That is the question." They may not have any clue that the lines they're quoting come from the great play, Hamlet. They may have no idea that those lines happen in the very dead center of the play in Act 3, Scene 1. They know that line. What's fascinating about that to be or not to be soliloquy, about which I'll speak more detail in a moment, is that right after Hamlet finishes giving what many believe to be the single greatest soliloquy in the history of the English language, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing in them. This is a really powerful moment on stage. Right after that really sophisticated moment, the beautiful Ophelia will come onto the stage, and Hamlet, her lover, will call her a nymph. Which, of course, to us today means absolutely nothing. But then we were raised on Disney's Little Mermaid, where mermaids or nymphs do really nice things for guys to try to save them. Sorry, that's not the mythology at all. A nymph is a beautiful Victoria's Secret model from the waist up. From the waist down, she's a hideous serpent snake. She will swim in the waters asking sailors to jump into the ocean and make love to them, and at the moment of orgasm, drown them. That's a nymph. And Hamlet will call the fair Ophelia a nymph, that is to say, a slut. And the audience is on the groundlings, okay? But there's a second audience. Let's just say it this way. If Shakespeare was nothing more than the Jersey Shore of his day, we certainly wouldn't be lecturing on him now in 2012, right? There's a second audience, and it's an important one. I mean, I remember years ago that a mother came to me in a parent-teacher conference, and she said, you know, Mr. McGee, I have a bone to pick with you. And I was like, oh, here we go. And she said, I need to ask you, why don't you teach something, you know, some really good literature? And I always love it when, you know, people say this to me. I'm like, oh, good literature? Like what? Well, you know, like Shakespeare. Why don't you teach something clean and pure like Shakespeare? And I'm like Shakespeare, do you have like a play? Me? Well, yeah, why don't you like teach Romeo and Juliet? I mean, that's that, you know, and I couldn't, you know. There's a reason why that mother would say that, and it's not because of the opening lines of Romeo and Juliet, lines which one or two of you maybe will quickly go and Google to read, and you'll be like, whoa, we turned freshmen onto this? Well, we kind of work off of the assumption they won't read it, okay? So that's why we can get away with it. Yeah, some of you will say, we shouldn't have been reading this as freshmen at all. Good heavens. And I will point out, well, that's probably true about most of the play, if you want to really take it at that level. There's a second reason, though, why Shakespeare is considered, a second audience, why Shakespeare is considered so important, and it's what we will call philosophic audience, the intellectual audience, the thinking audience. Now, the way I like to say this is, Shakespeare is writing for an audience that loves to hear him ask really important questions about life and sometimes answer them. I like the word sometimes, and I recommend you underline it. If you come to the plays of Shakespeare looking for all the answers, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you come to the plays of Shakespeare analyzing the ways in which very Socratic-like, see, there's a reason why I taught you your Plato before we pick up the Shakespearean plays, you're going to identify the ways that he asks some really incredible questions about life, about existence, and then he sometimes gives you an answer. Sometimes those answers that he gives are pretty complex, and they actually are contradictory. So as I was saying, Hamlet will say to the fair Ophelia, nymph, calls her a slut, and then he begins to have a conversation with her. Now it is significant that if today we present Hamlet on stage, the girl who plays Ophelia must be drop-dead gorgeous. She has to be, or none of it works. Because Hamlet will very quickly ask her an intriguing question. She is beautiful. And he will say, are you beautiful? Now, she knows she's beautiful, the way all Victoria's Secret models know they're beautiful. She doesn't say, yes, I am. She goes, huh? What? She won't answer. He says, are you honest? Now, she knows exactly what that means, are you honest? Do you tell the truth? And she says, Yes, of course I'm honest. I always tell the truth. No. She goes, huh? What? Why are you asking me? What? Hamlet says, oh, it's just because I know something about beautiful women. They're all liars. And the reason they're liars is they can be. They're beautiful. They don't need to tell the truth. They can get whatever they want another way. But ugly women, they have to tell the truth. That's the only currency they got. Beautiful women, they're all liars, and I don't trust any of them. Whoa. Now all of a sudden, we got a really interesting moment. And let's just say this out loud. Shakespeare has the capacity to entertain both the pit audience, the groundlings, and the sophisticated intellectual audience at the same time. So that, for example, right after the to be or not to be soliloquy, I gotta be fair, most of the groundlings, they ain't gonna get it. They ain't gonna get it, right? I mean, it's like, really? Why does he keep talking all the time? I need to... But the minute Ophelia comes on stage and he goes, yo, slut, how's it going? Now they're back, the groundlings. And calls her a nymph. That's sweet. Did you hear? But the sophisticated audience will know this play. Remember, I told you, coming back again and again. And the sophisticated audience, the minute they come back for the play a second time, and they realize that Hamlet calls Ophelia a nymph, a mermaid, they're reminded immediately that just a few minutes later, Ophelia's going to go out and she's going to drown herself. Ophelia will commit suicide. But the way she does it is interesting. Hamlet will find out later that Ophelia is wearing this beautiful dress and she lays back into the water of the brook with all the flowers. And nymph-like, we're told, she floats for a little bit as she goes under the water. Now, a sophisticated audience will go, whoa, that's really interesting to call her a nymph, an insult early on. And later in the play, she will die nymph-like. Shakespeare has the ability to address both audiences simultaneously, which is why he was able to make the bank he was able to make. Those people would come back again and again to be both entertained as well as challenged to finish. The challenge for us is that Shakespeare didn't write his plays for us. The F word occurs in every Shakespeare play, but the F word of today is not the F word of 1600, right? The language is going to change for us. We're going to find ourselves looking at plays in which Shakespeare will invent words. In Macbeth, for example, he will call those murderers cutthroats. We, of course, think of this as the name of a trout, but before it's the name of a trout, it's the name of an assassin. Shakespeare invents the phrase to literally cut the throat as a form of killing. So how to study Shakespeare? Well, what we will do is to invert in some ways the order. We could just simply go and watch the plays, and obviously that's always the funnest way to meet Shakespeare. But we can quickly grow either bored or frustrated because the plays are not, in fact, written for us. The language we're going to at times see obscure, difficult. The references sometimes difficult. So what we will do is we will split the difference. We will study one play, Hamlet, closely by listening to professional actors interpret lines for us. We will read along. We will pause and make observations. After we have done that, we will watch performances of the play. For the other plays that you will be studying, I recommend the following approach. Begin always with some kind of plot summary. That way you have a sense of what's going on. Okay? Then you can watch the performance. You'll understand Lear much better if you kind of read a little bit of a plot summary, and then watch a performance, and then finally come back to sit down and start reading the plays. As I have said to you repeatedly about any number of texts from Dante, and soon it will be Milton, Shakespeare is the same. We are only scratching the literary epidermis. We cannot get into much detail here, sadly. I'm trying to teach you how to read Shakespeare so that for the rest of your life, you can pick up these plays at your leisure